Sorry I took so long. Traffic's crazy.
You've missed your ETA due to an MEI shortfall in our SDP, but we may have found an FIS in this ordered AU.
Rufus! Enough of the three-letter stuff.
Sorry, Eon, but look at this. I found another world. An ordered AU. I mean, an ordered world.
Wow! It's beautiful. It's really amazing. How do they do it?
I don't know. Maybe they have an organization for developing acronyms, so instead of having big long names for everything,
I've got
use
it.
abbreviations.
They count
which is
people.
much more efficient.
But who counts them? How do they do it?
Oh, I see. Well, they have this organization called the Australian Bureau of Statistics. The ABS for short.
Statistics. Like 20% of the people in an area own at least one TV.
I guess so. Look, I found someone in the ABS office. Maybe they could help us.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Okay, you set up the coordinates. I'll switch on the portal.
Bring down the switch when the particle accelerators reach maximum velocity. Ready? Now!
My goodness, this isn't the tea room. See, things aren't quite right, I must say.
Yes, Miss Mc...
Oh, please, Eon, call me Alice.
We really would go to school, but it's so squashed. And if you want any lunch, you have to go to St. Margaret's College, because all the food shops are in Algerton.
My cousin lives out in the country, and she says they have a huge recreation centre without any roads to it, so nobody goes there.
Yeah, well, anyway, there's always garbage everywhere because the trucks just drive all over the place. And they're too big to drive down most of the streets anyway.
Susie said that she had to do a school project last semester about the town, but she couldn't even find out how many people actually live there.
We have to walk everywhere because none of the buses stop anywhere near where we want to go. And every news broadcast says something different. It drives my dad crazy.
Dear me, I must say that your world could do with a little more planning. And I think I may have just the answer. You need a census like we have in my world.
A census?
Every 5 years, each household in Australia fills out a census form on the one night. They answer questions about who they are and where they live.
So it's a count of everyone in Australia at the same time?
Exactly. When you know how many people live in an area and what their needs are, you can then plan things based on that information.
Like schools?
Sure. Knowing how many children live in the same area makes it possible to plan schools and recreation centres, skate parks, things that you guys might use. The census is used to plan electoral districts and give out government funds, but people also use the information in other ways, like planning where to set up a business.
I knew it. We should set up a census here too and fix some of these things.
One of you could come back with me to my world and I'll show you exactly how the census works.
That'd be great. Why don't you go?
Here, take the Comdeck to stay in contact with us.
The portal's ready. Thanks for your help, Alice.
My pleasure. Oh, by the way, do you think you could send me back to the tea room? Welcome to the ABS office. Have a look around to find out more about the census process. In the audio-visual theatre, you can learn more about the history of the census and the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Inside the collector's bag, you'll find the things that a census collector takes with them to deliver and collect the census forms. Why don't you take the bag packing challenge and see how many bags you can fill? Head to the library if you want to read more about the purpose and benefits of the census. Use the dictionary to look up the meaning of any words you come across. Behind that bolted door is the secure area, where we process all the census forms. I'll explain more about that once all of the forms have been collected. Most of what people actually see of the census process takes place out in the community, so grab the keys to go for a drive around. You don't have to worry about getting lost, just follow the green signs. You will find that you can't go to some areas just yet, but don't worry, you will be able to return later. The first stage of the census process is the planning and delivery. You can help us out while you learn more about the census. Remember, you will be able to use this information to help Eon and Rufus set up a census and improve things back in the chaotic world. Oh, if you ever want any help or anything else, just use the comm deck that Rufus gave you. Good luck. Welcome to the ABS Audiovisual Theatre. Sit back and enjoy the presentation while you learn more about the history of the census. See how you score on the census history quiz as you go. Use the mouse to select the correct answer for each quiz question. The first known census was taken by the Babylonians nearly 6,000 years ago. Records suggest that it was taken every 6 or 7 years and counted livestock, quantities of butter, honey, milk, wool and vegetables, as well as the number of people. The word census has its origins in ancient Rome. The Roman census was the most developed of any recorded in the ancient world, and it played a crucial role in the administration of the city. The Roman census was carried out every 5 years. It provided a register of citizens and their property, against which their duties and privileges could be listed. A similar importance was placed on the census in China from a very early period. In the year 550 BC, Confucius compiled a book known as the Shu King. This book dealt with not only the enumeration of people and the survey of the country, but also contained agricultural, industrial, commercial and other statistics from the time of Emperor Yi, about 3000 BC. Chinese censuses continued throughout the time known in the West as the medieval period, during which census taking in Europe appears to have lapsed. A householder's form and instructions to enumerators from a Chinese census of 1370 are believed to be the earliest documentary evidence of any census conducted. The economic and political situation of medieval Europe made census-taking difficult. The closest attempt was made after the Norman invasion of England with the compilation of the Domesday Book. This record of the lands in England was made in 1086 by order of William I. The objectives of early censuses were mainly to determine the military strength of a nation or to assess taxes and adjust the rights and duties of citizens. Censuses of modern times have tended to have broader goals in providing information for both economic and social purposes. The first modern record of an attempt at counting the population was made in Quebec, Canada, known at the time as La Nouvelle France. No fewer than 15 censuses were conducted between the years of 1665 and 1754. In Europe, registration of local citizenship was commenced in Württemberg in 1622, but systematic records of population do not appear to have commenced until the 18th century. In 1719, Frederick William I of Prussia began his half-yearly accounts of the population, recording where people lived and their financial details. In the United States of America, the first census was taken in 1790. Both England and France began conducting regular censuses in 1801, while in Norway this began in 1815. The first Australian census was conducted in New South Wales in 1828. The first population counts in Australia were known as musters, and the first of these was taken in Sydney Cove in 1788. The main purpose of these musters was to estimate the quantities of food and other supplies that were required to support the new colony. Musters tended to concentrate only on parts of the total population, convicts, free settlers or landowners, and only within certain areas of the colony. The Governor and Council of New South Wales passed the Census Act of 1828 to enact Australia's first census. This census was taken in New South Wales only and sought to show the number of persons by gender and age in the various localities within the colony. In the following years, the other Australian colonies, Victoria, Van Diemen's Land, South Australia, Western Australia and Queensland, all initiated their own census-taking procedures. One of the major problems with these early censuses was a lack of consistency in approach across Australia. With the exception of the census of the British Empire held in 1881 and again in 1891, censuses were not comparable between regions of Australia or even held on the same date. To add to the problem, the shape and borders of the colonies were undergoing considerable change at this time. The 1881 census of the British Empire was the first to attempt to count the total population of Australia and the rest of the empire on the same day. The operation was based on the methods used in England and Wales, and collectors were sent to the furthest corners of Australia to collect information on every inhabitant. As the population of Australia increased, the coordination of the census across Australia became more important. A conference of statisticians was held in Sydney on February 26, 1900. This conference resulted in a number of agreements, including the date for the 1901 census, although this was later overruled by the state premiers, the questions to be asked, and the methods to be used in tabulating the results. However, despite these decisions, differences arose in both the interpretation of definitions and in the presentation of results. It would be another 10 years before consistent results were achieved and the census became truly national. It was the Federation of Australia in 1901 that provided the driving force needed to fully coordinate the census on a nationwide basis. The newly established Constitution gave Parliament the power to make laws for the peace, order and good government of the Commonwealth, with respect to, among other things, census and statistics. On December 8, 1905, the Commonwealth Government exercised its constitutional power and enacted the Census and Statistics Act, providing that the census shall be taken in the year 1911 and in every 10th year thereafter. On June 18, 1906, George Nibbs was appointed the first statistician of the Commonwealth to carry out the provisions of the Act. Later the same year, the Commonwealth Bureau of Census and Statistics was formed under his direction, renamed the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 1975. In accordance with the Census and Statistics Act, the first nationally coordinated census of Australia was taken on the night of April 2nd, 1911. The 1911 census form contained 14 questions related to each individual and a further 7 questions related to the dwelling. Many of the questions from the 1911 census form, such as age, marital status and religion, are still asked today. Organisation of the 1911 census followed patterns established in British and previous colonial censuses. Large maps were prepared showing the partition of each state into census districts. Census districts were broken down into divisions, which were then further subdivided into collector districts. Although devices to mechanically process census data were already in use in other countries in 1911, these were still at an experimental stage. As a result, it was decided to tabulate the data from the 1911 census in Australia entirely by hand. The first nationwide census revealed that the population of Australia in 1911 was 4,455,005, an increase of around 18% on the population at the previous 1901 census. The 1921 census was the second carried out under the direction of the Commonwealth Bureau of Census and Statistics. The organisational structure was much the same as it had been for the 1911 census, but utilised the Commonwealth Electoral Department for collection and delivery. The Electoral Department continued to carry out this function until the 1986 census. The other major change in the 1921 census was the introduction of the Hollerith system. First used in the United States Census of 1890, the Hollerith system enabled census results to be tabulated automatically. 3 different cards were used for individual, dwelling, and family information. Cards consisted of vertical columns into which numerical codes relating to each census question were entered using a key punch or gang punch machine. From here, the cards would be processed using an electric sorter machine to group them according to the coded information entered into one of the columns, counted using an electric counter, and finally, the totals added up using an electric tabulator machine. The Hollerith system enabled census results to be processed much more quickly and accurately than ever before. Census taking did occur during the war years, but with a very different emphasis. The 1915 War Census Act required Australians to answer questions not previously asked in the census. Males between the age of 18 and 59 were asked what their occupation was and what occupations they were capable of. Questions were also asked about health, military training, possession of firearms, ownership of motor vehicles, traction engines, various animals, and the wealth and income of individuals. This information was used to organise war recruitment and list people born or whose parents were born in enemy countries and who were therefore considered to be enemy aliens. A similar military census was held during the Second World War. Social and economic factors have a significant effect upon the census, and this was perhaps most apparent during the Depression and war years. After 1921, the next census was due to be held in 1931. With the Australian and world economies in crisis, however, it was considered inappropriate to conduct the census at this time. The Census and Statistics Act was amended accordingly to allow a census to be held every 10th year or at such other time as is prescribed. Under the amended Act, the next census was held in 1933. The social climate of the day also had an impact on the types of questions on the census form. With Australia's population affected by the Depression and First World War, new questions were introduced for the 1933 census concerning orphanhood and war service. The latter question was included to help government plan the administration of war pensions. The census counted 228,282 men and women who had served in the First World War. The next Australian census was scheduled for 1941, but the intervention of the Second World War caused it also to be postponed. The first post-war census was taken in 1947, after an interval of 14 years. The 1947 census also ushered in a new era in questioning. A new prosperity and sense of progress swept Australia, along with a new tide of immigrants from Europe. The 1947 census played an important role in redirecting Australia's attention in the aftermath of the war. Previous censuses had concentrated on materials used in building houses. Now advancements in technology led to inquiries about the facilities contained within a house. Householders were asked to state whether their houses were supplied with gas, electricity and water, as well as a toilet, washing and cooking facilities. The government was then able to plan the allocation of funds for infrastructure development in areas where it was most needed, based on responses to these questions. The war years continued to have an effect on the date of the census through to 1961. After 1947, the next census was due to be held in 1951, but this was considered too close to the previous one. 1954 was chosen as the year for the 5th census, being a midpoint between the 1947 census and the proposed 1961 census. The large increase in population and due to immigration and the baby boom was also an important factor in the decision to hold the census later rather than earlier in the decade. Changes to the content of the census between 1947 and 1966 were minimal, although they did reflect the nature of Australian lifestyles and the information needs of the time. The 1947 census, for example, revealed that almost every household in Australia had running water, and the question was therefore omitted from future censuses. The census of 1961 saw the addition of a question on the ownership of television sets, which remained on the census form up until the 1976 census. In 1966, the field organisation of the census took a major step forward. Up until this time, the Electoral Commission had carried out the census based on electoral area divisions. In 1965, Godfrey Lynch was commissioned to undertake the review of statistical geography. His aim was to devise a way of dividing the country so that the statistical output from the census would enable better social and economic planning. The geographic framework created by Lynch has been found to be remarkably adaptable to changing circumstances and is still in place. Until the introduction of computers, census data was generally only available for local government areas and Australian states. Computerisation now meant that the data could be made readily available for the approximately 30,000 census collection areas within Australia. Census data could now be used to build a very detailed picture of Australia. Since the 1961 census, Australia has taken a census every 5 years. This practice has now become mandatory with the amendment to the Census and Statistics Act in 1977. Another important legislative change followed the 1967 referendum. While some attempt has always been made to count the number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in Australia, it was only in the 1971 census that their numbers were included in the official population count. The census of 1976 reflected the government's commitment to social change and the need for information on a wide range of topics for the implementation of its policies. The 1976 census included 55 separate questions, some with 2 or more parts, on a large range of social and lifestyle issues. New questions included the person's place of usual residence 1 year ago, the age at which a person left school, mode of travel to work, number of bedrooms in a dwelling, and loan repayment amounts. The large number of questions included in the 1976 census and general concerns about privacy led to a Law Reform Commission review published in 1979. The Commission examined privacy issues surrounding the conduct of the census, particularly with regards to the questions on handicaps and income and whether the census should be compulsory or not. The Australian Bureau of Statistics had never compromised the security of private information provided in the census. However, the ABS did take up the Commission's recommendations that greater effort be put into informing the public on the purposes of the census and the procedures in place to protect the privacy of the individual. The 1981 census saw further advances in the use of automated counting and sorting procedures to process the census results. Innovations have continued since that time, with the 1991 census being the first Australian census to use optical mark reading. This meant that the information no longer had to be manually coded, and marks made on the form were read directly by machine. The 2001 census will see the introduction of another feature to increase the efficiency of census processing. Intelligent Character Recognition, ICR, will mean that even the written responses on the form will be read by machine. The 2001 census form will also include questions about people's use of computers, their ancestry, and whether they wish to participate in the Centenary of Federation Time Capsule project. To To commemorate 100 years of federation, Australians are being given the option of having name-identified information retained and kept secure at the National Archives of Australia. This information will then be made public after 99 years as a valuable contribution to preserving Australia's history for future generations. Each census collector carries a bag with various items they need when delivering and then collecting the census forms. There are 6 main items that a census collector carries. Place them in the collector's bag and I'll explain each item. Household census forms. These forms are used to record the details of people in a household and the dwelling in which they live. Privacy envelopes. These envelopes are used when a person, A, does not want the collector to see their completed census form, or B, does not want other members of the household to see their completed census form. Collector cards. Census collectors use 4 different cards when distributing and collecting census forms. These are calling cards, non-contact cards, request to return cards, and acknowledgement cards. Information booklet. These booklets are given out with the census form to explain what the census is all about. Personal census forms. These forms are used to record details of an individual. It does not contain questions about the dwelling included on the household form. Identity badge. This is the badge worn by every census collector. Your job now is to fill the yellow census collector bags from the conveyor belt below. Use the mouse to grab and drag the items from the conveyor belt and drop them into the bags that need them. Each bag needs only one of each item, and you will find that some things on the conveyor belt don't belong in the bags. Census collectors meet all sorts of obstacles when delivering and collecting census forms. Some dwellings are more difficult to deliver to than others. Your job here is to help Kwan, the census collector, deliver a census form to the person living in miserly manner. Be careful though, because there are a few things to look out for on the way. Use the arrow keys on your keyboard to guide Kwan through the obstacle-filled yard to the front door of Miserly Manor. Then use the mouse to pick what Kwan should say to the person inside to convince them to take a census form. Census collectors must deliver census forms to every household in Australia. While most dwellings are relatively easy to find, sometimes a census collector has to look a little harder. Your task here is to deliver census forms to people living in this rural district. Use the arrow keys on your keyboard to drive the vehicle around and deliver the census forms to the people you find. Try to find everybody in the area using the clues that people give you. You may want to write down the clues to help you remember them.
Hey, this is great! Things are starting to happen here too. We've selected our collectors and we now need to decide which areas each will be covering. Why don't you help us solve the problem of creating collection districts for our census collectors?
Use the mouse to select a collector. Then click on the sections of the map to create their collection area. Collection areas must be made up of adjoining sections and cannot contain the home of that collector. Collection areas must also have a balanced number of houses and length of road, as indicated by the graphs next to each collector. Click on the Clear button to start again and the Done button when you have finished.
Now that you've set everything up, it's time for census night. Why don't you see how things are going at the hospital? Or perhaps you could help the Hicklesop household to complete their census form. The census counts everyone where they are on the night of the census, except for those people returning from work to their home the next day. In the case of non-private dwellings, such as hospitals, boarding houses and camping grounds, the ABS will appoint a special collector to deliver census forms to the occupants. Your job now is to help Nurse Patterson deliver census forms to the people in the hospital requiring a personal census form. Using the mouse, point to the various people who are in the hospital on census night. Depending on what they tell you, click on those people who will be counted on a census form in the hospital. Every household in Australia fills out a census form on census night. Families and other people in private dwellings fill out a household census form. They answer questions about each person staying in the house on census night and questions about the house itself. Your job here is to help the people in this house complete their household census form. Use the mouse to select a household member, then drag and drop the objects from their room that match the answers to the census questions. Once you've completed the census form for one household member, try clicking on another until you've helped the family complete their form.
You seem to be doing really well with everything. We're doing okay here too, and the collectors are all now out in the field. They have some FAQs. That is, they have some problems that they have come across along the way, so we thought you might be able to help us out.
Use the mouse to select a collector and they will explain the problems they have encountered. Select the correct answer to each problem from the options provided. Once you have solved their query, move on to the next collector. Kitty, get down! If you need help with the answers, refer to the collector's manual using the mouse to access the different pages. Don't be too worried about getting an answer wrong. You can always try again.
All the forms have been completed now, so it's time to collect them again. Take the car and head for the hills, or perhaps back to Tina's marina. I think that Henry could also do with a handover in Schedule Street. On delivering the census form to a household, the census collector arranges a day and approximate time to come back and collect the completed form. However, sometimes a collector returns to a house and finds that no one's home. The collector will then organise another time to try calling at the house to pick up the census form. Your job now is to help Henry the census collector meet his appointments to pick up all the census forms from the houses in this street. Use the mouse to move Henry up and down the street to the different houses. The clocks on the houses indicate what time those people will be home. Click on the house clocks when they match your timer at the bottom of the screen. If you miss an appointment, the house clock will change colour and set to a new appointment time. Try to meet as many appointments as you can without missing 3 for the same house. Not everyone spends census night in his or her own home. In fact, not everyone spends census night in a house. Your job now is to help Ranger Nikki, who is working as a special collector for the ABS, collect completed census forms from everyone staying in this national park. Use the arrow keys on your keyboard to guide Ranger Nikki around the tracks of the national park. Collect all census forms from the campers in the park on your way to the ranger station up on the mountain. Once Ranger Nikki has changed into her skiing gear, use the arrow keys to guide her down the ski slope. Try to collect all census forms from the people on the slope while avoiding the hazards along the way. The census doesn't just count people on Australian soil on census night, but also people in Australian waters. This includes people who are living or working on oil rigs, fishing boats, navy vessels, islands and other Australian territories. Bundles of census forms have been prepared for the people who will be offshore on the night of the census. Your job now is to deliver these bundles of census forms. Use the arrow keys on your keyboard to guide the boat around and avoid the obstacles. Find the different locations, then press the spacebar to launch the bundle of forms. If you miss, it will end up floating in the ocean. Collect lost bundles to try again. You may want to record the coordinates of each location to help you collect the forms again later on. Delivering a census form to every household in Australia involves a lot of planning. The ABS invests a lot of time and resources to make sure that every person is counted. Your task here is to create a map to be used by a census collector of all the places where people live within this remote area. To make your job a little easier, we have provided a helicopter. Use the arrow keys to fly the helicopter around. Use the spacebar to take off and land. The people you meet will give you directions to find other people. Find all the people to create the census collector's map.
Hey, this is really cool. Our collectors now have all the census forms that everyone has filled out. We just need a hand to bring all the collectors back to the depot.
Use the mouse to click on the arrows at the intersections and turn them clockwise. The arrows will guide the yellow census collectors back to the collection depot. Watch out for the roaming citizens though, because they will change the direction of these arrows. Try to position the arrows to direct all of your census collectors back to the collection HQ, that is, the collection depot, as quickly as you can.
Well, you've been a great help to us, I must say. Now it's time for the last job of the census. After all the forms have been collected, they're transported to the Data Processing Centre. This is where the information from the forms, except for the names and addresses, is entered into a database. For the 2001 census, people can choose to have their census information kept on microfilm at the National Archives of Australia to be released in 2100. Confidentiality is an important part of the census, so I'll be keeping an eye out to make sure you observe all the security procedures. Use your mouse to push the different buttons on the machines for processing the census forms. Machines must be activated in the correct order to process the forms. If you try operating a machine out of sequence, the alarm will sound and a light on the correct machine will flash.
Wow, we're nearly there. The census has really helped us out. The census forms that everyone filled out have now been collected and processed. We have heaps of useful info from all the work we've done to help us fix things. All we need to do now is plan how we are going to rebuild our world. Want to give us a hand?
Use the mouse to turn on and off the buttons at the bottom of the screen. Each button activates a map overlay showing a different characteristic of the population. Denser regions are represented by darker shades of colour. Click on the various services and facilities as shown in the map key and move them to the best position on the map according to the population characteristics.
dear, I guess it's time for you to go home now. Thanks for all your help with our census. I hope what you've learned here has helped to fix all those problems in your world.
Hi there, you've done a really great job. I've never seen things working so smoothly. Just wait,
I'll
you
say,
won't believe
I'll just
your
F you
eyes.
the PA on the TDG and have you BHQ in a jivvy. Sorry. I mean, I'm switching on the portal to bring you home.
Fill out your census form on August the 7th. Come on Australia.